Welcome to the Theology in Progress podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Josh.
And today, we're going to be talking about Would You Rather.
Welcome to the Theology in Progress podcast, where we want to grow in Christ through every conversation. Do you have doubts and questions about the Christian life? Join Chris, Brandon, and Josh as they tackle the tough issues to gain clarity, find answers, and become better disciples of Jesus Christ.
So this is going to be a little bit of an extra nerdy episode for you guys. If you are a nerd, you've probably played this game plenty of times in a nerd context. I mean, it's not a new game. Most people have played Would You Rather. But I found
if you don't play it in a nerd context, you're in junior high and you're playing it with some other weird conditions.
But me and my brother like to play Would You Rather a lot, where would you rather have the Force ability, from Star Wars, or maybe like the magic power from Harry Potter, or that's just an example of nerd stuff, right? And so we do that a lot. So me and Josh got to talking about that today, and we came up with a few Would You Rather theological questions, but also some quite nerdy ones as well. So we're going to play a little Would You Rather theological games here, so we're going to have a little fun today.
Play along in your head. Actually, alright, I'm just going to say it right now. In the comments, we want you guys to participate in this conversation.
Yeah.
Because we can have our opinions as to why we would rather do one thing or have one thing over another, but there's going to be a lot of other opinions out there too.
Sure.
So
let us know which one of these you would choose and why. See, tell us if you agree with us.
It's like school. Explain your answer.
Explain your answer. Well, it's just fun to give the rationale, because sometimes you end up choosing things that seem totally random. That's what I love about this game, is because it's all about the angles, right? Just because, one option might seem obvious, you gotta play the angles and the advantages to what you can do, maybe in all situations or every circumstance, right? So another popular one is, so would you rather have Iron Man's suit or the Hulk's ability to transform in his power? Now, you'd lose all control, of course. So which one of those would you want?
I don't know. Iron Man gave the Hulk a pretty nice whooping in the Avengers Age of Ultron.
He certainly did. He certainly did. And so if you're kind of a person like me who would gravitate towards, like, I want the power or ability myself rather than to rely on technology, I would lean a little bit more towards the Hulk. But
I just want to be able to manipulate the technology.
Yeah, but I lose control, and so I can't actually use it when I want to. So, yeah, Iron Man would probably end up having to win on that one. So, anyway, just a little
premise.
example.
And now we're going to do theology based on this.
That's right. So,
welcome to our funhouse.
Josh, would you rather know what type of fruit Adam and Eve ate, or know what Jesus wrote in the sand when people wanted to stone the lady who'd committed adultery?
I've naturally had more of an interest in what Jesus wrote, mainly because I think the passage in John 8 is just really, really intriguing, and it's a great demonstration of God's grace demonstrated in who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. Haven't had as much of an interest in what Adam and Eve ate.
Yeah.
But that's probably because I think of the story in Genesis as not so much a literal historical thing. I mean, I believe Adam and Eve existed and that they were in a garden and that God expelled them from the garden after they sinned. Yeah, but the point of that narrative isn't so much to focus on what fruit they ate or what day of creation did what. It's more just to get at the fact that God did it. This is what happened in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I think my interest in what fruit they ate would be less than the woman knowing what Jesus wrote in the dirt.
Yeah.
But
No, I think you're right. This is a good example of one that I think your mind would naturally jump to which kind of a fruit that it was.
Really?
At least in my mind, that's where I would jump to first, is because that's the ultimate mystery. That's what we're always talking about.
You want to know? You know what? You want to know what you're eating today that caused humanity to fall in the first place?
Now, I didn't think about it. Like, I like to think that it's probably a fruit that we don't actually have today, although, you could be right. I think, again, because of the story, the fruit is irrelevant. It's what the fruit represents, not necessarily what kind it was, whether it was a banana. I'm certain it wasn't a pineapple, because the Bible says it was pleasing to the eye.
Well, it also says it was on a
pineapples
tree.
Don't look good. And it says it was on a tree.
Pineapples don't grow on trees.
And so...
could have been an avocado.
Could have been an avocado. I don't think they're very pleasing to the eye, though, either.
Maybe they look different. Maybe God cursed the avocado after the fall. And that's why they look horrible.
They look all shriveled up and like almost wrinkly sometimes and a little bumpy, like they have warts all over them. No, that's awesome.
God cursed the avocado.
Cursed it. So, but when you think
it's not
about
sweet
it...
anymore.
That's right. Ooh, that'd be a good point. It's a very unsweet fruit. But when you think about Jesus writing in the sand, like, how could you pass up what Jesus wrote of himself? Like, that's a pretty cool thing, and it had such an impact on the crowd to completely change everything.
Well, it doesn't actually say that the crowd saw what he was writing necessarily. It just notes that he did it.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it
was
some
more
implication
whichever of you hasn't sinned, let him throw the first stone. I think that was more what changed him, but it does feel really weird to have that statement that Jesus bent down and started to write in the dirt. Yeah, it's just kind of there in the middle of nowhere. I mean, what's that doing there?
Well, okay, so if I was writing the modern day screenplay of it, right, in my mind, if I'm writing a character, Jesus, who is going to give the drop the mic moment of, you without the first sin cast the first stone, then what I'm going to have my character do is bend down and almost draw like a bullseye or something that would almost it would almost be like a dare to say, go ahead, I dare you, right? And so in my mind, it was something that would call them out all the stronger. So, but I mean, it could have been just something maybe as simple as, I forgive her, I like to think that Jesus was just really tightening the screws on that.
I have heard people say he was writing the sins of the people who were trying to stone the lady.
Oh, yeah, that would be...
Which, I can see how that kind of makes sense, but there's no more evidence for that than there is that he was drawing a bullseye around the lady or something.
That's true, too. No, I don't actually think he was drawing a bullseye, but it was almost like, like throw here. That's what I mean by bullseye, or, something like that. So, or go ahead, make my day.
So, if I had to pick, I would want to know what Jesus wrote. The fruit is kind of immaterial to me. Yeah. I don't really care.
Now, if the fruit ended up being something that we have today, I think I might want to know the fruit. Just because you're right. I've never thought about that before, but that would be a fun thought of, this is what started it all.
You can go into Walmart and have a stare down with the fruit and produce aisle. Which one of you did it?
Which one of you did it? That's awesome. No, but I think I would enjoy that fruit so much more as a result. Well, look. We're in our current sin condition because of this thing. You might as well enjoy it. Right? I mean...
If you're going to sin boldly.
Sin boldly.
Eat that fruit.
I mean, the harm's already been done now.
There's grace. And if you go to John 8, Jesus says, neither do I condemn you.
So in that case...
Go now and eat that fruit no more.
Oh, yeah. So maybe it was a plum, because I think plums are pretty pleasing to the eye, and they are. They can
look really, really juicy.
They can look very juicy.
Have a sign on them that says, I taste really good.
And they're very unique flavor. That deep red is very enticing for a fruit. So,
had to be a red fruit.
Otherwise, I would think it would be a pomegranate, but those aren't really fun to eat, so I don't think that it was going to be that.
They do taste good.
They taste amazing. But they're a lot of work and not really worth it, in my opinion. Unless you juice them. I mean,
Yeah.
you juice them and then it's fine. Anyway.
Sin in my mind comes way easier than a pomegranate.
That's a good point. It
All
wasn't
right.
a pomegranate because sin would be more difficult then.
You have to really work for it.
That's good.
All right, Chris, would you rather be omnipotent or omniscient?
That's a good one. And for those that might not know what omnipotent and omniscient is, we'll define those terms for you because
Defining terms, yay.
we're pretty good at that. Omnipotence means... Actually, I won't tell you how I remember these, but... Okay. I'll do the process of elimination. I won't tell you how I remember omnipotent. But how I remember omniscience is because it's omniscience, and so that... think knowledge, and so that's all-knowing, and omnipotent is all-powerful. So
That's potent smell.
it's potent. So it's P for power. That's a good way. Let's go with that way of how I remember it. So this is a tough one because, again, I'm just going to say it. Omnipotent. I'd be omnipotent.
Okay, so in my mind, if we want to pull this to a modern day equivalent, they've done this with the oh man, I just totally blanked. I feel like a loser failure nerd. Thanos is going after
Oh yeah,
the
Infinity Stones.
Infinity Stones. Thank you. I was trying to come up with the word infinity, and it was not coming to my mind. He's trying to get these Infinity Stones, and they do different things. One of them does give him a lot of power.
Yep.
Another one lets him know a lot of stuff. So really, which Infinity Stone would you choose?
That's a better way of putting it. If you could only choose one. Now, if we're not... Yeah, I like that. That changes my answer a little bit, I think. Because if we're just talking about the Power Stone that we see in Guardians of the Galaxy, assuming that I can wield it, and because I'm already a being of extraordinary power, we know that I can. I don't know. See, because... Again, this comes down to like what you could do with it reasonably. Because having omniscience and being able to know everything would allow you to use that power all the time. But you might not necessarily be able to act on it.
Yeah, it's not like you would have the power all the time to be able to make the use of the knowledge that you have.
Exactly. But with omnipotence, you would have an incredible burden to actually restrain yourself from using it, even though you could, say, blow up the planet. Which, by the way, guys, if I had omnipotence, you better start packing it in, because that's probably what would happen eventually.
Because remember, you're going to eat that fruit.
I'm going to eat that fruit. I'm sorry, that totally made me think of something else. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, I get angry, the Hulk comes out, the world dies. So there we go. Now you guys know what I struggle with the most, right? No, I don't know. That's a good... Omniscience does offer a lot more advantages, because even though you might not be able to act on everything, you're going to be able to act on enough that's probably going to put you in a much more advantageous situation more often than not. More often than what you would be able to, with omnipotence, rather. Well, again, in the context of this Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
If I could just snap my fingers and make things happen, true omnipotence, I'm going to go omnipotence.
I think I would have to go omniscience. I don't care as much for power, but like if I could sit here in my office and know exactly what's going on around everywhere else in the world, it wouldn't take a lot of power with today's technology to be able to use the omniscience to become really powerful.
Oh yeah, no. Knowledge is power, right?
It is. I just want to go after the power a different way.
No, and I think that's a perfectly viable option. It's
I'm the more sneaky, subtle...
It seems like it would give you a big headache, though, after a while.
Yeah, maybe.
part of me would like to be the slumbering giant that gets woken up and then turns around and blows the village up because they woke me up and I was still tired. Or, that aspect of the hero.
Yeah.
The slumbering hero that... So I don't necessarily have to know everything, but you better watch out when I want to move.
Yeah. Is it Bruce Almighty that has the scene where he's trying to keep up with all the different prayer requests that are coming into
and
him?
that's what I think of when I think of Omniscience, is that scene.
I can't shut it out.
Exactly. Which, speaking of Thanos, because Thanos has a real problem, the only reason why he's able to do what he does with the Infinity Stones is because he's a being of superior intellect to be able to focus and block out a lot of that noise, because...
it's a lot of noise.
After he gets, so spoiler alert if you have, if you're not up with the comics or anything like that, but
if you're watching in the cinematic universe right now and you're not really paying attention to the comics, just skip ahead 30 seconds.
Yeah. So he makes a connection with the entire universe. That's a tough connection to maintain, for a mere mortal or something. So it seems exhausting to me to have omniscience, and I also think it would get boring after a while. To just know everything.
It would get boring, but I think it would only get boring for me because I think it would only get boring for me if I were a Christian.
Then you couldn't do everything you wanted to do?
If I weren't a Christian and my sinful nature could just take control and run wild, I would have a lot of fun.
Well, that could happen maybe if you were omnipotent, but... I don't know. Okay, so omnipotence, omniscience.
I'm gonna go omniscience.
Seems about right. I'm omnipotent. We should team up.
We should.
We'll figure something out. Okay, so here's the question that I've been wanting to ask. This is a great one. Would you rather be a theologian and theologian could be minister or anything like that. So, be a theologian in the Star Trek or Star Wars universe.
Okay, these two universes have a totally different set of operating standards.
Yes.
And this kind of actually goes back to the omniscience omnipotence thing.
Mm-hmm. Because
in the Star Trek universe, it's not so much that you have people who can wield unlimited power, although especially in the original series, those do show up every once in a while, but they're really few and far between. It's more of the story of how humanity on Earth has advanced to the point where we all get along and everything is a quest for knowledge.
Mm-hmm. By the way, this is total plug for... I didn't plan this. I'm just thinking I needed to tell you this, Josh. You need to go watch. There's an awesome video on the movie theory channel. Is that what it's called? It's Game Theory, and then
wow, I'm totally
movie theory. I know. I'm blanking too. Anyway, same guy that does Game Theory does one about how Star Trek, the Federation, is actually a fascist organization. It's pretty fascinating, right?
Nice pun there.
There you go. So anyway, just because they have advanced, but it actually might just be as a dystopian future as we see from all the other futuristic type stuff, but one that works pretty well for them. So anyway, go ahead.
I could see that. Okay, so so we have in the Star Trek universe, we have man on this quest for knowledge. Mm-hmm. In the Star Wars universe, it's a little more centered around trying to bring balance to the power that we have available to us. Mm-hmm. So I think I would still have to go with my answer from the last question and say I'm going to move towards being a theologian in the universe that is on a quest for knowledge. That appeals to me more.
You're a total Trekkie.
I am. I like Star Trek more than I like Star Wars. I know.
There you go. And that's probably what's going to dictate most people's answer, because I think I would end up going Star Wars, because, I like Star Trek, But Star Wars holds a special place in my heart. And a theologian in the Star Wars universe, we call those people Jedi.
I was about to say. They have a temple, they're the ones who are it's a religion.
That's right, it is.
Okay.
And so...
Go ahead.
No, go. You go.
So then the next question is, how does the gospel message affect how you as a theologian interact in that universe?
See, I'm not talking about the gospel. I'm just talking about a theologian in that universe. So in the Star Trek universe, it's basically just 400 years in the future of this universe. That's not very appealing to me. We deal with problems of trying to teach people the gospel with technology now.
I guess Jesus exists in the Star Trek universe.
That's right. So that, for no other reason, that's one of the reasons I'd probably end up choosing Star Trek.
Although,
given the fact that the Force or whatever is that universe's God rather than, obviously the one true God. But your question's good. We should discuss
the very beginning of every Star Wars movie, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, does not mean
it's in a different universe.
It's in a different universe.
From that perspective, you're correct. But
grab a napkin, homie. You just got served.
But we all inherently understand, and you're right, even with the Star Trek stuff. So, we all inherently understand that there's different fictional universes we create that operate under their same rules. Because technically, otherwise we'd say the same thing. Like the DC universe obviously takes place in not our current reality since they have fictional cities, whereas Marvel does since it only takes place in actual cities that we have, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, but we understand, blah, blah. They might work under different
Batman's not real. Spider-Man is.
Totally is. I know you're hiding him, New York. Anyway, no, but your question is a really good one that we can answer. I think about how do we present the gospel, and we'll do it under the the Star Wars universe first, since that one probably is a little bit more unique and interesting. This is something that most people probably don't think about, right? Is because everybody when you watch Star Wars, the natural inclination is that this is going to turn into a total Star Wars theory podcast here in a second. I'm just warning you. Is that the Jedi are the good guys, right? Because they fight for the light side. That's obviously the good side. Yoda's, obviously. Oh yeah,
I know where you're going with this now.
So, and then we have the Sith, who are obviously the bad guys. They represent evil and darkness and all that. But it's really interesting. Look at the Jedi. Look at some of their practices. They are some of the most anti-Christian practices that you can promote. They literally promote total. I'm sorry. Emotionlessness. Christians should encourage emotions, right? God created emotions. He created us as emotional beings. We'll get to that when we talk about your Mr. Spock here in a little bit. But
we will.
So, that's a good thing. And then there's also the thing that they're always talking about is bringing balance to the Force, right? And this is where I think the Jedi kind of err in the Star Wars universe just as much as the Sith, because if the Jedi win, then there's not really balance. Unless they're saying the dark side is just so much more powerful than them. So really, for the idea of the Force, it's really a Buddhist idea. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Of finding balance between the yin and the yang, and finding balance in yourself. So, theory time, that's what I ultimately think the new Star Wars movies will end up going is...
Okay,
it's probably Kylo Ren doing something. I was going to say,
if you haven't watched the new Star Wars movies yet and you're going to, skip ahead 30 seconds.
I think Kylo Ren is going to... Especially, it just works with our postmodern culture where there's no necessarily right or wrong. It's your personal perspective. Star Wars has been hinting at this whole thing with bring balance to the Force for, decades and through 6 and now 7 movies. I think we're finally going to get that to happen with Kylo Ren, right? He stabs his father. That should have been the end of his journey to the dark side. And instead, he was more confused and actually weaker than ever. So I think there's going to be a different sort of transformation that they end up personifying as the end goal of the Force.
Yeah. I guess we shouldn't feel too bad. It's been like 9 months now.
No, I mean, if you haven't seen the first
Star
one,
Wars
you're not going
7
to see
came
it,
out, so yeah.
If I give anything away about Jar Jar Binks, I mean, I don't feel bad about that. So
He's Snoke.
He's Snoke. That's right. Misa back. I was so hoping that Kylo Ren was going to be Darth Jar Jar, man. You have no idea. I was really hoping that. See, if you really didn't think that we were going to be nerdy this episode, now you know. So, back to the gospel. I think the challenge in a world where the Force exists would be to communicate that neither balance, nor light, nor dark is the goal. Because what the gospel message would say to that then is, essentially this is a false god, right? That even if you can... See, I don't know, actually. I want to talk about... Because we don't have access to something like that, it makes it a little difficult. Either the Force is a force of nature that would have been created by God that could be used as an extension of our own body, similar to just... the way that we reach our hand out and pick up a cup to take a drink. And what they have done is then turned a created part of reality into something to, in a lot of ways, be worshipped and sought after rather than the Creator himself. And so I think
sounds
the gospel,
good. I think there's something in Romans about that.
Probably. We should try to look for that. So I think the gospel would come in and obliterate, sort of the Force worship and put it back into balance, no pun intended there, for what it would have been for maybe God's good pleasure for us to just enjoy and be and be part of.
We can tie all 3 questions together with what you were just talking about, because I've wondered sometimes if Adam and Eve being in the garden, if God didn't intend for them to eventually grow up to the point where they did know good and evil.
It's good.
Of course, I can't speculate too much about what would have happened had they not eaten from the tree. But if you look at... I
can read black.
It's true.
Ted Dekker speculates.
He does. So does C.S. Lewis, by the way.
C.S. Lewis does too. Well, not as much, though. That's the only reason I didn't mention... I was going to mention Paralandra.
That's pretty strong.
But not for... He doesn't explore... It's very much in its infancy, the way C.S. Lewis does it.
Yes.
Ted Dekker explores
he doesn't take it to its natural...
After. Yeah. Yes. Now, C.S. Lewis does do an amazing job of it.
He encapsulates it more in one little short story.
Yeah.
Whereas Ted Dekker makes this great, big meta-narrative thing take place. Okay, so anyway, if you look at some of the ways that Paul describes the resurrection and what it seems like we're going to be like after the resurrection, I don't know that we can say or make a clear biblical argument that our knowledge of evil is going to disappear. We will know good and evil.
Yeah. We can't, I mean, those are part of us now.
Yeah.
We can't erase part of who we are.
But in that, we will be perfectly good after the resurrection. I think it's going to be like knowing evil. We know what an evil choice would be, but after the resurrection, we will have absolutely no desire and no will to even want to carry out that evil thing.
Yep.
Which I think makes us a whole lot more like God than we are now.
No, I think you're right.
And so if I had to speculate about what it was like in Genesis, I wonder sometimes if God's intention wasn't for them to grow up and eventually become aware of what good and evil was, but to do it on God's terms. And choosing the fruit and the choice of knowing good and evil through that path was saying, God, I don't want to do this on your terms. I want to get it all now.
Which, by the way, one of our professors talked about, I believe it was one of our professors, talked about falling into sin and temptation in that way does allow you to know good and evil, but it doesn't actually allow you to know what good is. Because you failed. You fell into temptation. So you don't know what the only person that knows what the other side of temptation looks like.
That's true, yeah.
Is Christ. So, no, I think you're right, whereas they would have gained that knowledge the right way instead of the wrong way. You know, because once you would have said no to temptation, the knowledge would have been there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so go ahead.
So, if we look at the Star Wars universe as the universe where we're talking about people trying to gain power or bring balance to nature, if you want to call it a natural thing, the created thing, it's the...
Well, they're just microorganisms called midi-chlorians. I mean, come on, we all know this.
They are. It's got to be a natural thing. They surround us. They penetrate us.
Bind us together.
Lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Okay. Where was I going?
I was trying to get a rise because of all the midi-chlorian haters out there, but that is almost proof that it's not the Holy Spirit. And they're little... You know what they really are? They're like mitochondria. That's what they are. Since our mitochondria are like these... our mitochondria and our cells have completely different DNA. They're almost like if you talk to like evolutionary biologists, I mean, they'll say that they were parasitic organisms that came and attacked us when we were single-celled creatures or whatever in the evolutionary process, and we formed a symbiotic relationship with them. And so they're part of our DNA, much like the midi-chlorians were to them in the Star Wars universe.
That's how it happened. So that's good to know.
They pricked his finger, took his blood, and got a midi-chlorian count, so I don't know how you figure that, but...
Okay, so if like for the Jedi, pursuing light or bringing balance to the Force is their way of trying to know both good and evil, the gospel in the Star Wars universe would be saying what you've done is the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
It runs counter to God's intended way or God's intended order because you've put creation up on the pedestal of something that's to be worshipped or something that's to be gained or manipulated or balanced, when in reality God's got a different idea.
That's good. I like it.
Now if we were to take this over and talk about the gospel in the Star Trek universe, that's actually much easier to do because we have hints of the culture of the Star Trek universe in our culture today, especially Western, postmodern, or postmodern, however you want to call that.
When you say easier, you mean more familiar.
Yeah, I mean...
Not that it's easier.
It's easier to see how the gospel connects to that.
Yes, not spreading the gospel.
Not spreading the gospel.
It'd be any easier.
That would be incredibly tough.
Yes.
But in the Star Trek universe, the human knowledge has been elevated way up there, almost in the same way that nature has in the Star Wars universe, because humanity in the Star Trek universe has advanced beyond prejudice. They've advanced beyond wars and things like that. They're a united race, and they're going throughout the galaxy spreading their knowledge, in a sense, which has always just really cracked me up, because you get these episodes, like especially in the original series, where Kirk and the rest of his crew meet some culture on a random planet, and they have this prime directive, non-interference, and somehow they still end up spreading some of their ideas that this is the way things should be. You guys should get over your tendencies to hate and kill one another and be more like us, because we're advanced.
Almost like a fascist dictatorship that's primed for colonial
I'll have
expansion.
I'll have to watch that.
Interesting.
But this becomes
film theory. That's what it's called.
Film theory. That was
theory,
it.
Not movie theory. Sorry.
This becomes especially true in The Next Generation. So the original series was in the 60s, and The Next Generation was in the 80s and 90s. And you can tell how even just the American culture between the 60s and the 90s advanced to more of this postmodern thinking. And so, especially in the next generation, it's really like we've advanced beyond the point where we need any kind of hatred between peoples. So the gospel in that kind of a setting would have to attack the idea that humanity has some kind of ability to be good on their own.
Yeah, that's good.
Which we know, according to what Paul said in Romans, that no human ever has the tendency to be good or righteous. And which, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that and working through what that looks like, because you see a lot of stories about people who do a lot of good things. Like I watched a TED Talk on a writer. I think she was like in her 50s. I forget her name. I think her name was Lydia something. Anyway, she was telling stories about how she always felt like a misfit in life, and how she overcame that by doing the stuff that typical postmodern people do. You start to realize that you have value, that you have power as an individual, and just all that other stuff that helps humanity rise above where we are. And you see those things, and you can't look at her and say, she's not successful, she doesn't feel fulfilled in life, because she obviously does. She's obviously successful. And so by humanity's standards, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the gospel says, you're not righteous. We have a relationship, whether good or bad, with the God who made us. And he's created the world to run differently than we see it.
Yeah. With very similar of the same outcomes, though.
Yeah.
Which is the difficulty, again, because as much as we don't want to acknowledge it, there is value in having problems in life. Because it helps us see that we can't solve these things by ourselves, right? We are sinful. And look, Star Trek's a fictional world. It's not a it's not a glimpse into the future.
I'm okay with that, because beaming technology scares me.
Well, that's true too. Hey, okay, we could actually do a whole podcast on that. So
where does your soul go when you're beamed from the ship to a planet?
Just random extra thought. Me and Josh were sitting in class one time, and I think it was a Christology class, and I turned to him and I said, I think I just figured out the theology for beaming people from Star Trek. Like, if that ever becomes a reality, I have a theological position on it now. So, yeah, we should talk about that sometime. But
we should.
Two things that I can see as being really difficult for the Star Trek universe. And you'd probably encounter the same thing with the Star Wars universe, but you got the Force, so that was the focus of that. And that is the mastery of the universe itself. Because I think still in our cosmology, the way that we think about the world, heaven is still above the earth in some way. If we get to where we're exploring the universe, for a lot of people, this is the way that they commonly conceive of heaven, right? Is God's got to be up there in space somewhere. But once we go up there and find that he's not there, I think a lot of people have problem then maintaining that faith, because we can explore it, and we haven't found God yet. Although I'm pretty sure they found God one time, right, in Star Trek?
They found multiple kinds of gods.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
In the original series, they ran into the god Apollo once.
Yeah.
Which was interesting.
Yeah. But so, that gives a very interesting point of view that, what if we did run into Apollo? Oh, wait a second. Apollo's now this alien that, all of a sudden all the ancient alien guys look like they're, a lot saner than they currently look. And it's like, oh, well then maybe Yahweh is just another one of these aliens, right? And the Ark of the Covenant was obviously just this gold generator that was alien technology that was pumping out smoke so it looked like a pillar of cloud by day, and you could see the fire shooting up at night.
Which was, of course, just radiation. When you open the box, the radiation melts people's faces
That's
off.
right, and you just die. Exactly. Or high voltage from the gold conductor. So, there's a lot of cool things that make sense that way, and that's going to that would challenge my faith. Goodness gracious. If an alien landed tomorrow and said, hey, I'm Yahweh, I'm going to be struggling. right?
Yeah.
Because, or, or I'm Jesus and I'm really just an alien that came back. And, I mean, that's going to be very, by the way, if any aliens are listening, that'd be an awesome way to take over the world.
Yep. You'd get a lot of people.
That'd be an ultimate Trojan horse right there, man. So anyway, maybe we should write that science fiction book.
We sound like weird heretics right now.
We can put a nice Christian allegory in there, and it'd be easy because it'd be so on the nose. But anyway, we're big nerds. Yeah, and then and just the fact that, again, we don't need God anymore for the Star Trek universe. Like, we just don't need him.
Yeah.
Again, we've solved our problems.
Mm-hmm.
So where is he, and who cares?
Yeah.
That makes it very difficult. I mean, try ministering to somebody in the United States today. Where is he, and who cares?
Yeah.
The same two main problems that we deal with.
And in the Star Trek universe, on multiple occasions, they've run across immortality.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least ways to indefinitely preserve a consciousness.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one episode where an alien race removes Spock's brain.
Oh, wow.
And implants it in this jar. And Spock has consciousness outside of his body. And they claim he would never die.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
You gotta watch the original series. That's where it's at.
Well, I've watched a lot of it. I've never done a systematic watching of end to end, so...
Yeah, there's no sequence or anything, so...
Well, I'm just saying from episode 1. I've just seen random episodes, but not all of them.
In fact, they're not even chronological. That bugs me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. If you pay attention to the start dates at the beginnings of the episodes...
I'm sure
they're not even in sequence.
But there's guides to watch them in chronological order, right?
Yeah, there are.
Have you ever watched them that way?
No, I've watched through straight from Season 1, Episode 1 to Season 3, Episode 20-something, I don't remember.
Okay.
Like twice, but that's all I've done. And then from there on, it's just watching a few episodes at a time when I feel like it.
Okay.
But
well, now we're just talking about Star Trek and not theology at all. So anyway, hey guys, if you have enjoyed this podcast and want to see more nerdy, fun type stuff like this, if this is a good way to kind of have fun and deliver some theological content at the same time, please let us know. Again, in the comments, we want to hear what your answers were. Which ones would you choose? And let us know if you want to hear more like this, because we came up with a whole slew of Would You Rathers. This is one of my favorite things to do, and we're big nerds. You got to see a little bit more of that this time, and we'd love to start incorporating more of those elements into the podcast. So if you like it, tell us. If you don't, tell us that too, and we won't do this ever again. We'll start being like the TV preachers that just sit here and talk about our Bible like this. So anyway, let us know.
yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. Thanks for listening, guys. We will catch up to you next week in our next conversation.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Theology in Progress podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a like and share this episode. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our conversations. You can also support Theology in Progress through our Patreon page. $1 an episode goes a long way to make this podcast possible. If you have questions you'd like to discuss or ideas for a future conversation, we want to know. Contact us through Facebook or by emailing letstalk@theologyinprogress.com.